Well, all this week, Israel has been bracing for retaliatory attacks from Hezbollah in Lebanon and from Iran. It follows the assassination of terror group leaders in Beirut and Tehran last week. Israel is protected by a sophisticated air defense system that it has been developing for decades.
April 2024. Israel sustains a massive missile barrage from Iran. More than 300 drones, rockets and missiles form a coordinated attack. For Israel's air defense systems, it's the greatest challenge yet. Israel claims it intercepted 99% of those hostile missiles and drones. So how does it achieve that kind of success? It's down to a multi-layered air defense approach, comprising a number of moving parts, in some cases quite literally. Truck-towed missile units form the innermost layer, the Iron Dome. It tackles short-range threats such as rockets and mortars and was developed with help from the US. It has intercepted thousands of rockets since it was instituted in 2011, and Israel claims it has a 90% success rate. Next comes David's Sling for mid-range threats. That is designed to shoot down ballistic missiles fired from between 40 kilometers to 300 kilometers away. Again, it was developed in collaboration with the US. And the outermost layer is the Arrow for the longer-range ballistic missiles. It operates outside the Earth's atmosphere in space, which allows for the safe dispersal of any non-conventional warheads. Regardless of the method, intercepting rockets is a costly business. The cost of one Arrow interceptor missile is between $2 and $3.5 million. According to media reports, 110 of them were used to defend against the Iranian attack, suggesting a cost of $385 million. The mid-range rockets from the David Sling system are about $1 million each. Estimates put the cost at $550 million to $1.1 billion just for the April operation. There is another important layer too: Israel's Air Force, a key part of its defence picture. And, in addition to all this, there are new tools coming online, such as the laser-powered Iron Beam, set to be integrated into Israel's multi-layered and seemingly successful air defense system.
Well, I'm joined now by Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell. He's a former pilot in the UK's Royal Air Force and is now an advisor at Universal Defence and Security Solutions in London. Mr. Bell, it's good to have you with us this evening. I think everyone is looking at this situation and asking them, if there is an attack by air against Israel, will the Iron Dome be enough to protect the country? What do you say?
Yeah, good evening, Brent. Well, the Iron Dome alone won't be enough, but the layered system of defences, you've got to remember Israel is the dominant military force in the region. It's on the 13th of April, it sustained that massive wave of attacks and managed to repel most of them. And it's tried and tested in terms of its systems. I would say, though, what we've got to be careful of here is that the Iron Dome, for example, you mentioned, is very, very capable, but most of these systems only have so many missiles available at one time, and you can deluge fire literally thousands of missiles at the system and actually overcome it. The great thing about the Iron Dome is it differentiates. It only looks at the missiles that are going to strike built-up areas, and any that are just going to go into the desert, it ignores. So Israel's got a very comprehensive system, but it won't just be about Israel repelling this attack. As we saw on the 13th of April, when Iran put that massive wave of attacks in, coalition efforts were also very important, which include the Royal Air Force, the United States Air Force, and others, all helping protect Israel's skies.
Yeah, the Pentagon says it expects any Iranian retaliation to follow a similar game plan to the attacks that we saw April 13th of this year, perhaps larger in scope, with Hezbollah participating in Lebanon. And we know that Hezbollah has thousands and thousands of rockets that it could launch. So talk to me about the role of Israel's allies if this indeed happens.
There's two sides to that, Brent. One of those is if Iran was serious about hurting Israel, it could do that. But it would also know that if it mounted an attack that was effective, that killed lots of civilians and was deemed effective, that Israel would be forced to respond. The situation would escalate, and Iran blatantly does not want that to happen. At the moment, Iran's pride has been hurt because Ismail Haniyeh has been killed on its territory, and it's been waiting since the 31st of July when that attack occurred in order to work out what to do. But it's trying to find a measured response that demonstrates internally to Iran that it's serious, it's credible, but it also wants to avoid precipitating a war with Israel. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a very cautious, measured response, because even though on that fateful day on the 13th of April, nearly all the missiles were shot down, and the only ones that got through to Israel actually hit military targets and they were brushed away pretty quickly. I think that's seen as a successful attack from Iran because they can show the devastation in large numbers, but actually didn't precipitate a regional war. And I think that's why we're seeing this pause and the delay. And it'll be very interesting to see how Iran responds. But it looks like Israel's had a dress rehearsal, if you like, for this on the 13th of April. And I have no doubt that it will be better, more effective at shooting down those weapons if the big barrage comes again.
Well, Mr. Bell, let me ask you about this dress rehearsal. I mean, if we look at it from the other way around, Iran was able to glean lots of information back in April about Israeli military positions, for example, as well as the allies and what weapons they used to repel that airstrike. So for Iran, April looks a lot like a rehearsal for what is about to happen in the near future. I mean, would you agree with that?
Well, yes. I mean, one of the things about military capability is it's not what you see, it's what you don't see. The US, and particularly the West, prides itself on its technology being its asymmetric advantage. And I suspect that Iran would have hoped that most of its missile systems would have been more effective in April than they were. What's fascinating is that Russia has also been delivering surface-to-surface missile systems and air defense systems to Iran. But there's been lots of speculation that because these systems are meant to be state-of-the-art, Russia claims they're undefeatable, and yet Ukrainian forces in Ukraine have been defeating them. So it'll be really interesting to see whether Russia's supplies of missiles, that Iran is allowed to use those. And even if it does, the West will learn a lot about Russia's military capability if they're used. So bluntly, Iran is not well known for having a high-end military capability. It almost certainly shot its bolt in April, and we're very concerned to make sure that it doesn't give away all its state secrets and its capability in one shot.
Sean Bell with Universal Defense and Security Solutions. Mr. Bell, we appreciate your time and your analysis tonight. Thank you.
Welcome, Brent.
Mark Cancian is a retired US Marine Colonel and Senior Advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Welcome to DW. Israel's Iron Dome defense system can be overwhelmed at times. How often does that happen, though?
It doesn't appear to have happened very often. During the conflict with Hamas, Hamas fired hundreds of missiles. Israel was able to intercept almost all of them. It hasn't run out. Same with Hezbollah and same with the attacks in April. It's important to keep in mind that this is only one part of the Israeli defense system. As we just heard, there were two other parts, plus there's the Air Force. And it's also important to keep in mind that the United States is involved. The United States has ships offshore. They participated in defending Israel in the last attacks in April and would participate in defense on any future attacks.
So is the bigger concern here regional support as well as US support? I mean, what happens if Israel doesn't have the added support of regional powers like Saudi Arabia and Jordan?
They're not really dependent on Saudi Arabia, but they do want to maintain ties to Saudi Arabia because they don't want this war with Hamas to become a regional war. Hamas has been trying since the very beginning to make this not just Hamas versus Israel, but a regional war against Israel. And so far, they have not succeeded. Hezbollah has participated some, but not extensively. Of course, there's a lot of question now about Hezbollah's role since Israel has assassinated one of their leaders. Jordan plays a very quiet role, but many of these missiles are flying over Jordan, and they want to avoid that. They also recognize that Iran is not a friend of theirs. Iran would overturn their government, so they quietly provide defense.
Mm-hmm. How much have Iran then and its proxies bolstered their weapon systems in recent years?
Well, Iran has developed this full spectrum of capabilities, short-range missiles, all the way up to ballistic missiles. So it has become increasingly sophisticated. The proxies domestically, indigenously, just build very crude rockets. We've seen that with Hamas, for example, and also with Hezbollah. The problem is that Iran sends some of its more sophisticated missiles to its proxies, and then they use these missiles. We've seen that particularly with the Houthis, who have used Iranian missiles to attack shipping in the Red Sea.
There have been reports just this week of Russia supposedly supplying Iran with new systems. Can we expect some sort of change in dynamics in the region because of various countries' support?
Well, longer term, there's a concern that Russia will provide technical assistance to Iran, allow them to build more effective, more deadly rockets. I don't think you're going to see any Russian missiles being fired at Israel, but longer term, you could see Russian components, Russian technologies employed. Russia has talked with Iran about providing some air defense missiles, some defensive systems, and that's possible, but those would be defensive.
And while that support has stepped up, what about concerns of wearying support from the likes of the US and others for those keen to support the Palestinian effort?
Well, the United States has been emphatic that it will provide any defensive aid that Israel needs and will participate in the conflicts defensively, ships offshore, for example. Gets controversial when talking about offensive systems because of the effect on civilians. We've seen that with Hamas and Gaza. A lot of concerns, for example, about the U.S. providing 2,000-pound bombs. But for defensive systems, I don't think that there'll be any change in U.S. policy.
Mark Cancian with the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you very much for chiming in.
Thanks for having me on the show.